Wabash. This week speaking is Kim Johnson. Kim Johnson is the Director of Communications and Marketing here at Wabash. She has been with us for 8 years, serving predominantly as a designer and photographer. Here with her talk titled, Taking Better Pictures, Kim Johnson.
Good morning, Wabash. Today is my Wabash anniversary. 8 years ago on this day, the Monday of homecoming week, I began my journey as a little giant. By Thursday of that week, I had wondered what I had gotten myself into. And I think my knees are shaking right now as badly as they were on that day, walking through the ranks of Chapel Sing for my first time. In my 8 years at Wabash, I have likely flown under the radar of most of you. But if I do this, you will probably recognize me a little better. I get a lot of this, maybe. Technology is fabulous when it works. There we go. I get a lot of this, and will I be on the website? Thank you to the Sphinx Club for the honor of getting to speak at Chapel today. And especially thank you to Zach and Daniel for all the help they provided to help me get set up. I'm going to start by documenting this moment with a picture that I will call the scariest place on earth. For me, it's pretty easy to hide behind a camera. I'm comfortable there. I don't run the risk of saying something stupid when I open my mouth. I don't have to put myself out there. But the funny thing is, when you spend as much time behind a camera as I do, eventually people expect you to produce something good. When I sit out there, I don't worry about saying something stupid either. But now, I'm up here. And the assumption is that if you go from out there to up here, that you'd better say something good. The largest group of people I've spoken in front of is 4,500 people. I've spoken in small groups, in sororities and fraternities, in churches and school assemblies. I've even spoken in other countries. But there is nothing more nerve-wracking than getting up in front of peers, colleagues, and people who are generally way smarter than I am at a place I have grown to love and respect like I never thought I would. Like many who have gone before me in this space, I wrestled with what wisdom could I possibly impart? I even asked my 7-year-old daughter. She said, "You should talk about me, Mommy, and take me so they can see who I am." Much to her sadness, I made her go to school today. And I thought I would share with you something that's a little easier to figure out than any 7-year-old is on most days. I want to share with you a bit about what I've learned as a photographer. I also want to share with you a few tips on taking better photos. And just maybe you'll find that something I've said applies to more than just what you do with your camera. Technically, photography is the science and art of capturing light. Again, technology is fabulous when it works. Give me a minute. It's really cool, I promise. All right. There we go. Technically, photography is the science and art of capturing light, either on an image sensor, like in digital cameras, or on light-sensitive materials such as film. Photography is used broadly in fields like science, manufacturing, and business as a means of discovery and fact-finding. Most of us, however, likely think of photography as a type of art, or a hobby, or a means of storytelling. You know, that picture says 1,000 words thing, you know? So what is it about photography that's so important. Photography allows us to document the passage of time. Think about the photos you've seen of 9/11 or Hurricane Sandy or the Boston Marathon bombing. Photography allows us to document significant events in history and in our own personal histories, or even things that seem like insignificant events at the time. These last two are probably the things that have each of us carry our own cameras. Photography allows us to reconnect with places we've been and to connect with people and places we would otherwise never know or understand. Photography allows us to hang on to a moment we know we will never relive, or hang on to a person we know we will never see again. As for what I do here at Wabash, the photos I take help others get a sense of the college, who its people are, and what kind of place it is. My photography is used to help sell this place, the experiences you can get here, and the potential outcomes you can achieve after leaving. Chances are pretty good that everyone in the chapel today has received a piece of mail at some point from Wabash College with one of my photos on it. So to get started today, I've boiled it down to 10, as my daughter would say, easy peasy lemon squeezy tips for taking better pictures. Number 1, pay attention to the details. Stop what you are doing and take a better look. Number 2, keep it simple, but a little context can sometimes help tell the story. A frog is just a frog until you can see that he's small enough to fit on a blueberry. Number 3, don't be afraid to get a little flashy. Sometimes you've got to bring your own light to the situation, but don't overdo it, because once you've seen it, it's easy to spot fake light. Don't be afraid of the dark. There's beauty in the darkness if you can just sit still long enough to find it. Number 4, a change in perspective is good. Don't just look at your subject head on or at your own eye level. Explore all sides. Some angles give the feel of submissiveness or petiteness. Some angles, grandeur. Getting closer intensifies the feeling. Go with what you think is best, even though someone else may disagree with you or may have done it differently. Ultimately, it is your decision. You have to defend your own art. Number 5, collaborate. Some of the images I am most proud of have come from collaboration with others. This was not my idea. I did very little of the legwork to make it happen, but I took this photo and it became this. Likewise, this was not my idea. Shout out to Zach Green. Nor did I take it. But I worked with Zach to technically make it possible. And we worked with the person who did take it to make sure that he had the tools that he needed. It turned out to be one of our biggest social media hits of the summer. Number 6, be patient. With yourself and with the story in front of you. This one photo took an hour and a half to get. It's not exactly what we were going for, but puppies don't sit still, so we had to improvise a little bit. Number 7, know where to focus. Obviously, I did a really great job on this one. All that focus on the crowd in the background. We don't really need to know what's going on in the game anyway. And watch out for last-second distractions. I honestly think that the referees make bets before the games. I don't care, football game, soccer game, basketball. Basketball are the worst. I think they make bets to see who can block more photographers. Don't get discouraged if you aren't getting exactly what you had hoped for. Let go of your fear of not getting it perfect and have a little fun. And understand that sometimes you just don't get the shot. Number 8, be sure to get in the picture every once in a while. Don't let yourself hide behind the camera or say you look to this or to that. Stop making excuses and just smile. Number 9, you miss 100% of the pictures you don't take. Carry a camera and don't be afraid to use it. I get asked frequently, what's the best camera to get? The best camera is the one you know how to use, you will use, and you will keep handy. A $5,000 camera is worthless if you're too afraid to use it and you don't translate what you know into your images. Number 10, you are never too young or too old. Keep looking and keep taking pictures. Photography is simply capturing a moment in time. That moment may be a 500th of a second. It may be a 10th of a second, a half a second, 5 seconds, or 10 seconds. It's one of the things I love most about photography, but often one of the hardest to understand. A photo is a true moment. It really happened. It really is what was there, but it may not be what we actually saw. What we see may be true, but it may not be the entire truth. There's a Thailand-based photographer who recently created a series of images that depict how social media has exploded with truth but not the whole truth images. This came from a blog post just last week about that work. Or there are these images that came from boardpanda.com. They aren't quite what they seem when you first take a look. Look closely. Do you know what you're looking at? Are you sure? This one took me a minute to figure out. I'll give you a second. Photos may be stretched to fit the version of truth that best suits our needs and desires at the time. There's always that one guy, when he's told to show up in a black suit, he shows up in khaki pants and a navy coat. Or the guy wearing the white socks. So, we change his clothes. It's easily manipulated. We can't always tell what's real and what's not just by looking. Can you tell which is real? Is that wrong? Is it deceitful? You have to decide. I have lines for myself that I've drawn. One being, I will not retouch skin without being asked. To me, that sends the message to the person I'm photographing that he or she is less than perfect and somehow needs to be made better. Likewise, I will not take off a few pounds, but I have cropped out an occasional beer can and removed a distracting element from a photo. I've tightened up placement or removed stray hair. But I always try to do it right the first time because it's so much easier than fixing it later. My point is, it's not as easy as taking it all at face value. So what do? Do you stop taking pictures altogether? Stop trusting the pictures other people show you? Well, you start by questioning what you see. Was the moon really that big in the sky? How is the sun shining on the front of that flower, yet simultaneously setting behind it? Is his skin really that smooth? Does anyone's body ever really look that skinny, muscular, taut, tanned, radiant, fill in the blank with whatever the current marketing buzz is? Does anyone's hamburger ever look as good in reality as it did in the picture? Teach your brothers, your roommate, your siblings, your kids someday to understand what they are looking at may or may not be a real representation. Teach them how there is often a lot of interpretation by both the photographer and the viewer of the photo. Find more opportunities to get a different view rather than quickly forming an opinion with just one picture, and then encourage others to do the same. It takes continuous effort. Think back to when you were being recruited to Wabash. Anyone want to admit to this picture being what you assumed you were getting into when you heard about Crawfordsville? Anybody want to? Oh, somebody was brave back there. Anyone start with this picture and become pleasantly surprised after you arrived and got to know the place a little better? My first picture of Wabash looked a lot like this. I had a guy friend in high school who was about as shy as they come. We'll call him Chris. He came to Wabash and pledged a fraternity with a couple other guys from my high school. Toward the end of pledgeship, they had a formal, and evidently, every pledge in the house had to have a date. So, one of the guys in the house called and asked if I would be Chris's date for the formal. That night, the room was dark. The floor was filthy and slick, and the place reeked of intoxication. Part of the festivities included each pledge having to escort his date to the middle of the dance floor, sit her in a chair, and place a garter on her leg while everyone else watched. Let me remind you that my date is Chris, the shyest guy ever, and he was actually better friends with my brother, my big brother with a black belt, who he was surely picturing pounding on him when he found out Chris had his hands up my dress. And as luck would have it that night, my date's name was first on the list. I was pretty much mortified. I'd spent all this time shopping for the perfect dress and the perfect shoes for my first date with Chris at my first fraternity formal. And there we were, in the middle of the dance floor, getting catcalls and then boos for not putting on a better performance. As embarrassed as I was, I know Chris was even more so. Well, no, I assume he was more embarrassed than me. We didn't go on another date after that night. In fact, I'm not sure I've seen him or spoken to him since that night. I don't know what his perception of that night was. I suppose he could have just as easily been thinking, yeah, look at me with my hands up Jeff Carter's sister's dress. And the other young women that night, toward the end of the evening, whose dates were laying them on bare mattresses and stripping them to their panties, some using just their teeth before seductively placing a garter high on their thighs. What was their perception of that evening? Was it, look how hot we are? Was it, why isn't someone stepping in and stopping this? Why isn't someone saying no? Why can I not make myself say no? We were all there in that same moment. What was real? Who had the truest picture of what was going on in that scene? That 3-hour moment was my first picture of Wabash, a drunken fraternity party that played into every stereotype about Wabash guys I had heard growing up in this very community. I carried that picture for a long time. I had had stories shared with me of gangbangs in basements and faculty and staff crossing lines. I've seen high-profile student leaders and alumni so intoxicated at football games that they can't even see straight. And I just have to wonder, what's the picture being taken by the community member driving down the street, by the recruit who's attending his first game, or by the girl who learned the definition of the gentleman's rule while sitting in a chair in the middle of a fraternity dining room at a pledge formal. Fortunately for me, since starting here 8 years ago, I have found hundreds of really great pictures to replace the one that I carried home with me silently in tears so many years ago. Pictures of fraternities winning national awards for service, student organizations mentoring at-risk boys, basketball players who have food drives, football players who read at the library, pictures of students who are already making a difference in their chosen disciplines, biology, chemistry, writing, theater, religion, and art, before they even walk across the stage to receive their sheepskin. We have alumni who pulled together $50,000 to send the football team to Virginia and Washington, D.C. for an experience like no other because someone else did the same thing for them. And an alum who was so challenged and pushed and changed by his professor that he made a gift to name a building after her. And just like her, this place is full of professors and coaches and staff who so challenge and push and change their students every day that any one of them deserves to have a building named after him or her. Who is right? Whose picture of Wabash College is right? That's the danger of just taking one picture and walking away. Each picture is a snapshot, just a single moment. What's the picture you are carrying? Is it time to take another look? Do you have just one? Or do you have a scrapbook filled with various images? What's in the picture of you? Does it depend on who took it? Is it accurate? Ultimately, as much as it really sucks sometimes, we can't change the pictures other people take of us or how they choose to view those we take of them. What we can change is the way we look through our own viewfinder and what we allow to be seen by others in each of the photographs taken of ourselves. Thank you.